luckily they Thank you. Yeah, actually, let's just go with that. Okay, thanks for your patience, everybody. I was at CCTV wrapping up show there. So, being after 6 o'clock on Tuesday, January 22nd, we'll call to order the regular Winooski City Council meeting and ask that everyone please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Mayor Holmes.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, up first tonight is agenda review. This is an opportunity for council making adjustments to tonight's agenda. I think it's pretty straightforward given the number of items. Okay. We will move forward then with public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the council on any items that are not on tonight's agenda. Again, the agenda's in the back. Please make sure to sign in, members of the public. Okay, so seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have two items on tonight's consent agenda. We have the city council minutes from January 14th, 2019, and approval of payroll from 12/30 and 1/12/19, ending in 1/18/19. Any questions or concerns from council in regards to the consent agenda? Any questions or concerns from the public? Seeing and hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. So, motion by Nicole, second by Eric. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries. Next up is city update.
Thank you. So we've been through quite a storm in the city. So at first I wanted to thank the community for their patience with us as we dug out of the last 3 days. But also a huge thanks to our public works crew who were able to maintain our roads and sidewalks fairly effectively. Just so people kind of put this in context, we have 6 professionals who can drive plows, trucks with plows on them, and 2 additional who are deployed to plow sidewalks. So those 8 people put in over 300 hours in the last 3 days maintaining our city. So that's about 12 hours a day each for over the holiday weekend. So they put in a huge amount of work, and I think it really shows. I think they did a fairly good job, and thank you for the residents to being patient as we dealt with 36 hours of accumulation, but kudos to the public works crew for all of their work. Similarly, the fire department was here, staffed through the weekend, as well as obviously the police department is always here. The fire department per diem guys and women will be out clearing hydrants over the next couple of days, so if residents would like to do some extra shoveling, I'm sure they would appreciate that help as well. Also want to thank the 30 residents who braved the cold yesterday to come out to the Martin Luther King Day of Service at the OCC in the library. They put in a huge amount of effort and really worked to beautify the building. We're very appreciative. On some project updates, you've heard me talk about regional dispatch a couple of times in the last couple of months. We had our regular monthly board meeting this morning with IXP, the consultant who's been hired to kind of launch the authority. He then this afternoon presented to public safety personnel, police, fire, and dispatchers from across our shared communities on the work before us in the next couple of months. So hopefully it was a good opportunity for our public safety professionals to learn more about that process and provide a little bit of feedback. Angela issued last week an RFP, a request for proposals for a vendor to provide credit card and debit services for the city. An opportunity for residents to use. We frequently get asked if people can use credit cards and debit cards to make payments. So with this new vendor, we will be able to do that. We're hoping to announce that with the launch of our new website this month. And good job to Angela for drafting that RFP and getting it out the door quickly. Angela and John Rauscher and the chief also had a grant monitoring visit, a regular grant monitoring visit with VTrans or AOT last week. Specifically, they were looking at the grant we were awarded for the Winooski Bridge rail work. The crosswalk enhancement grants the Riverwalk East grant and the 2016 police equipment grant. It was the grant monitoring visit was very good, no findings, generally positive outlook, outcome altogether. So good job to the crew for monitoring our grant dollars effectively. And then lastly, we have our first AFSCME negotiation session this week that will just be to set ground rules and put a plan into place. So on your February 4th agenda, you will see an executive session for us to talk about our shared goals for that negotiation process. That's all I have. Things not on the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move on to council updates. I think we started down there last time.
We've got a few meetings lined up, but haven't met since last Monday. Just a reminder to folks to complete the city manager evaluation form that Julie sent out. The deadline is tomorrow.
Yeah, we've got, going to be meeting with Alex to just go over how his presentation went last week. Alex, our treasurer, on Thursday. In addition, that'll be right before the planning commission meeting. And then just to tag on to Jesse's comments, it's always really cool to hear neighbors telling stories about neighbors helping neighbors during storms. And so I know in my neighborhood, just a ton of that, which was really, really cool to see, and great. And very in a similar fashion and vein, I have 0 complaints in my email inbox today and 0 voicemails about how the city handled the storm. So big kudos to everybody. No, it's a ton of work, and the reality is you cannot make everybody happy in those situations. It's just not going to happen. But great communication and everything too. So that worked really well. I just want to add that I have 3 outstanding parking tickets in 3 municipalities that don't accept debit cards or credit cards online for payment of parking tickets. So way to go on that. It's an awesome initiative. And it's been tremendous that we have that opportunity to pay ours online here already. So I think that's awesome.
Would you have freely admitted that if you weren't resigning? So the downtown Winooski board has posted their job description application link for hiring a director position. So if you know anybody who might be interested in applying for that position or have networks that you can put it out to, I know that they're in the recruitment process. They're pulling together a hiring team, which will include a number of different individuals. They're hoping to recruit business owners in the area, as well as hopefully participation from a member of the city, staff, and other people within their network to participate in a robust hiring process directed by that hiring committee.
So I got a call from Governor Phil Scott yesterday and wanted to confirm with me if I wanted to be appointed to be the state representative for Winooski in the General Assembly. I said yes. And
Congratulations.
so tomorrow morning at 8:30 I get sworn in, and I will be the voice for our city.
Congratulations, Al. It's tremendous.
Thank you. It's been an awesome journey.
It's great. You know, you'll do an awesome job with the community. Thanks for your service. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I will continue my role here at the city council.
Don't ever leave.
Hey, and on that note, somebody very quietly drifted off last week without saying anything. But it's the time of year where people are signing up for office, and we would certainly be remiss if we didn't recognize your service from Christine Lott too. Thank you so much for serving on city council over the last year. Your time here, you put a lot of energy and effort into it, and know that you're trying to continue to serve the residents of the community in a different capacity. But for your time on city council, we're really grateful. Know what an investment it takes from everybody up here at this table in terms of time and sacrifice. And it was a pleasure serving with you. So thanks for all of your time and effort and work over the last year as a city councilor.
Thank you.
And I can't believe you let us just go through that whole meeting without anything. You know we like to give speeches. And with that, you know, just in case there are people watching at home too, as a reminder, we do have those open seats for mayor and city council, and the submission for signatures are due
February 1st.
at 5 p.m.
4:30.
4:30 p.m. 4:30 p.m. on February 1st, because there will be people on February the 1st running around. So 4:30 p.m. on February 1st, and encourage folks to engage anybody at City Hall if you've got questions about that process too. So thanks for everybody who has already stepped up to try to serve. It's awesome. Okay, so next up we'll move into regular items. So first up is discussion of the 20 budget.
So we put this meeting on your budget calendar as an opportunity for you all. You've heard from me and from all the department heads about our FY20 budget proposals, but we wanted to reserve some time for you all to have discussion, debate amongst yourselves, and give us any feedback that you would like to see reflected in the final budget number that's brought to you next Monday night for your consideration and placement on the town meeting day warning. So what I've included in your packet is the summary roll-up budgets from across all the funds. I've also included just a draft ballot that we've started to put together, so you can see how on the municipal side the 5 different votes that are linked are interwoven will be laid out. And then I've also provided a summary of the votes you'll actually need to take next week, assuming you want to move forward all or a few of these items. And there are quite a number of them, because you'll need to approve the budgets, approve the amount to be raised by property taxes, approve the bond resolutions for the 2 capital projects, and approve the placement of the local options tax on the ballot as well. So that's the overview. We're happy to answer any questions you have, and really just wanted to provide an opportunity for you all to have a discussion or give us further direction if you would like.
Great. So I think we'll open up to comments, thoughts, specific concerns, because I've started narrating this out in the public some, and have gotten at least a little bit of a rhythm to some of it. You know, I'll maybe just high point my own thoughts to kick things off. Sometimes that helps other people, but it's, you know, I'm extremely proud of the budget that you guys worked really hard to come up with. And, you know, from a general fund perspective, the idea that people can vote for the general fund at a 6% increase and move forward incredible investments in both the, you know, community vibrancy and our economic and community vibrancy through mainly the pool and the Main Street revitalization project, I think is just a huge testament to the really, really great work that went together to put together, you know, a plan that is fiscally responsible as we could be, with executing huge parts of the community's vision. So I'm obviously hugely proud of that, and appreciate the work that was done to keep things that level services on, I don't want to say the soft cost side, but, you know, on the operations piece. And, you know, we know that continues to always be a, you know, a challenge with, you know, the level of staffing here and some of the resources we put into some of the department areas, and appreciate the hard work that goes into making that work and still providing great services to the community. So thank you. And then, you know, I think the thing that I haven't talked a lot about publicly yet is getting, you know, the steps that we're taking to get salary alignment, and ensuring that we are building a sustainable workplace here too, is something that we need to probably talk about more, even, which is a comment I had for some of those slides, for example, because I think people recognize that taking care of all the humans that are sitting here that do all the great work is, you know, that's the best thing that we can do from an investment standpoint. So really proud of the work that went into that. You know, 6% is the highest I've ever had to talk to people about, but I've never had to talk to people about us getting this much done. And that's, you know, that's part of the deal, right? Stuff's not free. And, you know, something I said to the community tonight on the sign-off show for CCTV was, you know, don't be afraid to be bold and take some chances as a community when they're calculated and put together wisely. And I feel like we've tried to do both here. So, you know, and just the other items, I mean, I think we've talked a lot about the garage and Hickok Street, both being tax neutral and great investments in downtown vibrancy and in our neighborhoods, infrastructure in our neighborhoods. And then just on the 1% piece, have really had incredibly positive conversations with business owners about this, where there's just kind of been a collective shoulder shrug, with the exception of one business owner. There's been a collective shoulder shrug of, yeah, this makes sense. And especially when you can tell us what you're putting it towards and it's going towards that kind of infrastructure investment, they get that. And there's no complication on the collection side of things. You know, the whole dollar businesses have a little pricing thing to figure out, but you know, we've talked to our highest volume retailers, and they've been on board too after asking a couple questions. So you know, feel like that's the right thing too. So I'm very supportive of the things as they've been put forward. So thanks for all the work that went into that and for the thoughtful conversation over the last couple of months.
I'm not sure about the agenda because with the public hearing for 6:30, so it'll be good since we seem to have a crowd here. So, I think that this budget represents the culmination of a tremendous amount of, you know, starting with visioning work and outreach to the community, culminating with staff working incredibly hard to put the pieces together to ensure we can move forward with the community's vision for a pool and Main Street revitalization while still maintaining an affordable community. When we presented those projects to the community, the estimate was collectively we would be looking at more than a 12% increase. And this budget here reflects a 6% increase, and that includes an increase in our operations budget. So I think we've more than delivered in terms of, and you really have more than delivered in terms of the commitment that we all made to make sure that the projects proceed on the timeline that the community expects, but in a way that mitigates the impact to the property tax. And so I see it as a puzzle that has a lot of different pieces that connect, much like that piece back there. And if one of the, you know, I think it's a high stakes budget because while it is coming in, I think a lot lower than we predicted when the individual capital projects were presented, it's still more than we've asked for before, and there's a lot of, you know, I'm viewing it as a communications opportunity over the month of February to really help tell the story to our community about, you know, where we've been and why all these pieces are critical to ensuring that we have the picture that we want to have for this community. So anyway, I have a, you know, question about the information we had about Green Mountain Transit rates potentially going up, and whether we can absorb that within sort of what's been presented, or if that's a game changer. I'm not clear about the magnitude of that. But other than that, I'm appreciative of the work that went into this budget, and proud to support it.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have said it better. I think one of the things that I'm also really thankful to for, in regards to all the hard work you and your staff have put into this budget, is I remember a conversation we had in considering the Main Street project very early on in conception, and one of the things that I had said, and I think was pretty universal in how a lot of us felt, was that this is a really important project, a long time in the making in our community, but we don't want staff to feel the pressure of us moving forward in this project means we need to scale back services for our community that
I hope you all are really proud of providing, because I know I hear from a lot of community members how fantastic of a job you all do. And to be able to have a budget that comes in with these two important projects, as well as maintaining level services at 6%, is absolutely amazing. I do think, like you mentioned, Seth, this is the biggest number that's been put in front of the community in a while, but we've also had conversations for a few years that this is something we're going to have to anticipate, and why I think we've worked hard in the past to keep it, keep prior budget increases under or around 2%. So for us to be able to move these really important projects forward for our community while still ensuring that we're going to, be plowing the streets at the same level that we have been, that there'll still be programs and opportunities available for Winooski youth and our community members, is really a testament to a lot of hard work and a lot of ingenuity that it seems like, from my perspective, you've put into planning this budget. So thank you very much.
This is my first budget process, and what I really appreciated was the very thorough, well thought out presentation from all the departments. It made it very clear to me that what was proposed really ties into our strategic vision. Ultimately, I believe a budget is a moral document, and I think it really speaks to the values and wishes of our community. So I think this budget was done with a lot of careful thought and a lot of hard work, and I definitely support it.
That's a great way of putting it. It's hard to tell people when they vote yes or no on a budget, they're really voting on a whole set of principles of how we invest and try to achieve the vision that they've set forward, because that's what it is. So I'm not hearing a lot of concerns at the moment in terms of the proposal.
Could you speak to the Green Mountain?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Let's try that.
as Ray shared with you earlier today, CCTA is facing some pretty significant financial hardships, and they're looking at a variety of ways to mitigate that difficulty. So what we had, and we got notice of that in mid to late December. When we built this budget, I presented this budget to you on December 3rd. We thought conservatively estimated a 3% increase in our $185,000 we send to them every year, and that was based on what we'd seen through the previous years. So an additional 1%, it's $185,000 we sent to them. An additional 1% we can absorb within the current budget. You could add in a couple of $1,000s, ask us to do that for the final draft next time, but I'm pretty confident we can absorb that within the 6% we've talked about. I think, quite frankly, just to editorialize for a minute, Ray and I met with the executive director, general manager from CCTA last week, and I think, quite frankly, our bigger concern is the potential rate increase for our residents. Not that I want to balance that budget on the back of the taxpayers, but I would rather pay a couple of $1,000s more through our municipal budget than have them see 50 or 75-cent increases for each ride, which would have a very deleterious effect, I think, for our residents. We've also, and Ray, jump in here if I misspeak, we also recommended, one of the things they're considering is a raise in the kind of the trip rates, but a decrease in the monthly passes. Thinking about those who regularly use the bus, their value would go down or stay the same. And our concern about that is a lot of our residents may not have the monthly investment to make at one time. They may not be able to come up with $50 at the beginning of the month and therefore pay as they go. So we've asked Mark to look at options that may support if they have to go with some kind of rate increase, options to support our residents to realize that savings initially. I can also tell you that they will be coming to the State House to look for funds. So it's putting that out there.
Well, it's trickled down to individuals, but the number of bus passes that are issued by service organizations, that have prescribed budgets and only so much bandwidth to get those out the door would go down, which is really unfortunate to think about. It also, I think, challenges us to think more and more about how services can be provided in the community on a different basis, with less reliance on the public transportation system potentially. But just for context too, 4 years ago they came to us with a reduction, an increase in expense and a reduction in coverage for the city, and changed the bus patterns here, and quite frankly lopped off about 25% of the coverage that the system covered, while also increasing our fees, which we said, okay, we're going to let that go, but we want to hear real assurances that this is you're making a financially sustainable model here that's going to continue to provide the service at the cost that you did, with nominal increases going forward. And there was assurance then that, of course, doesn't appear to be the case right now. So that's unfortunate.
We are not projected to see any service reductions. They are looking at some routes farther out in Chittenden County, and we did talk with them about our concern about that, as some of our residents are actually commuting out, so commuting to jobs in Essex or Williston, and our fear that those reductions could negatively impact our residents. But for the Winooski routes, those have no plans to change.
Is Colchester making any contributions at this juncture? So I would also just very bluntly call for some political pressure on that, because that's totally unacceptable, and I hate to throw a neighbor under the bus like that, so to speak, but the idea that so many of their residents can benefit from that service and the region can benefit from the service, and not have a contribution from the municipality, in my mind, has been totally unacceptable for over a decade and continues to be unacceptable. So I'll just throw that out there as a the door.
I have another question.
Set some fires.
It's ridiculous.
Yep.
So I'm assuming that the combined speeches mean that we're pointed towards the level services plus the 3 additions that are being. So I just wanted to talk about so that's what I was kind of getting. And I just wanted to talk about the lowering barriers funds, and what plan is there for identifying what how those funds can be used and how input would be. I don't want to come back, I won't be here, but maybe be in those seats a year from now and that money hasn't been used, or it was used in a sort of ad hoc way. So I'm interested in, both from my own understanding, but also if questions come up, sort of how those funds might be, what you're thinking about in terms of the process for identifying ways to lower barriers using those funds.
Sure. So I think how staff has thought about this after our strategy session last June is that we heard this as a priority and get it to hopefully get more voices to the table. So our plan would be, if this budget's approved, to come back, those funds would be available as of July 1st. So to come back to the council between March and July and put together with a recommended plan, and have the council approve that plan to use those funds. I think the things that we've heard interest in are, depending on who's elected and what they prefer, buying technology for them so all can feel like they can participate. We've talked about providing childcare services. So for example, if we were to align our commissions to meet on the same night, do we provide childcare or meal support on that night? We could also look at options to do that. If the commission structure stays the same, quarterly provide that support or something like that. Those are really the 3 areas we've identified: are childcare support, technology support, and more kind of supplementing the resources that people spend when they give of their time and therefore aren't at home having dinner with their families or
Right.
participating in their lives otherwise. Also, obviously, it will be up to the council to
Right.
specifically approve that plan, but that's what we've talked about thus far.
So if I may be so bold as to recommend, this could be a topic to explore or at least identify some folks who could inform the plan through the equity work that's happening. So when you talk about eliminating barriers for people to access the corridors of power, so to speak, going to them and asking what you know,
What's stopping you?
what's stopping you, what
Right.
would be actually useful, because the last thing we want to do is, you know, perpetuate a myth in our own minds
Right,
about what the
right.
problem is, and when in fact it's actually something else entirely.
Like a bunch of computers sitting here on
Right,
news.
so it just reinforces
Yeah.
the practice of, we've all decided that this is the problem, when in fact we're creating some opportunities for people to have good dialogue, and this could be an exercise of, if there's money to support, you know, participation, how would you think it could be used? So just food for thought for those who will be here, and I think it's a great it's a, you know, it's not a large amount of money, but it's definitely an important reflection, I think, of this body's commitment to including as many voices as possible in the deliberations of city government. So
Just one more public access pitch is I hope that the next council will consider using fund balance contribution for next year to offset the increase in, or the decrease in funding that CCTV is receiving. And consider, this year I think we've got enough on the table, and we're trying to rebalance another community partner with Winooski Valley Parks District. And I hate to recommend the use of one-time fund to correct a systemic issue, but in this case, I would strongly recommend that the next council take that issue up, although I'm not going to push it on this year's budget because I think it's hard to start, because you start those couple thousands here and there and suddenly you've got another penny on the rate. But just a flag for future folks.
I similarly, I do think the conversation is a little bit premature because we are having the discussion actively as a community in regards to affordable housing policy and how we can find ways to interject resources into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But I would urge anybody who's in this room that remains at this table after March to strongly consider, depending on what the need may be, how as a city we can dedicate some level of resources or funding to support that Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Because if we say this is a value that we strongly hold and we're creating this vessel by which we will be able to support the development of affordable housing, let's find a way to put some resources towards being able to do that.
Duly noted.
Get all that? Great. But by and large, with those kind of forward-looking things or remisses about what it would have been great to throw in, but understood why we can't, it's just reflective of the great work that's being done here, that some of those things weren't on there, and we understand the prioritization that has to take place. Any other comments, questions, concerns from council? Any other comments, questions, concerns from the public? So seeing and hearing none, this is on as a discussion item. So thanks for bringing this back. Thanks for all the great work on the budget. We'll talk more about it next week, I bet.
can I just ask a question, because I'm not sure when we'll get back to it, on the warning? No, I've lost it. The language, sorry.
The warning or the ballot?
Well, they're the same, I think, right? So sorry. Okay, so for the garage 6 and Article 6 and Article 7, So Article 6, the Hickok Street bond vote, and we talked about this a little bit last meeting. So it says a portion of the repayment is intended to come from water fees, subject to any reduction for applicable blah, 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 blah. And then for the garage, it says repayment is intended to come from parking fees. So I'm wondering why there's a difference between the language in the Hickok Street versus the garage fund, if in fact.
Hickok Street includes a portion of street reconstruction in the total bond amount, so part of it would be general fund.
Okay.
So are you, what you're,
I guess I thought that the two projects were similar in that they would have no impact on the property tax rate or on the general fund. Maybe I don't have that right.
so Angela's right, Hickok, when we pave a street, those
Yeah.
dollars come from the general fund. Streets are owned by the general fund. We have built that into the existing capital budget within our existing capital funds, so there's no
Right.
increase to the property tax rate as a result
Part
of
of the
this.
capital.
It's part of the existing
That's
capital.
So it was in the
Previously
CIP
dedicated.
that you were presented. You don't see an increase to anything in the CIP related to debt service for FY20 because the debt service for the street reconstruction portion will be taken out until FY21. But that was included in the 5-year CIP.
Okay.
But
But the bonded amount does not include the street reconstruction.
It
It's
does.
the total project cost.
it's just different sources of repayment contributing towards the debt service.
Mhm. So it's the overall project cost is the full dollar amount, but we didn't want to go for two separate bond votes because you don't want to replace all the water lines and then have no funds to be able to repave the street afterwards.
Right.
And the bond authorization, the public gives us authority to bond for the full amount, and then how we can almost take out less debt, or we can repay it across funds.
Okay.
Or we can repay it across funds. I do think it is important to note that because of our size and because we get bonded service through the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank, while it is our intention and it's very appropriate to indicate that in this language, all our bonds are general obligation bonds.
Right.
So if there is a default, it does go back to the taxpayers.
Right.
But the intent is to pay from these other revenue streams. And I will tell you that John is sick tonight, so I allowed him to go home. The paving cost on Hickok Street is the smallest amount of that project. The big dollars there are in the water lines.
And we did ask specifically if we should list how much money was to be coming from water funds, but it was advised against by legal counsel since we aren't certain the amount of debt that will be taken out
Yeah, that makes sense.
for each piece.
You want to it could change over time. That's the whole concept of a general obligation bond. It's a general obligation on a specific stream of revenue obligation.
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? Return to the public. Did that inspire any new questions or concerns from the public?
Did we ever get the number of, like, the water rate impact from this budget for the average homeowner?
I don't have that off the top of my head. We can get it for next week.
Any other questions, comments, concerns from the room?
I'm done.
All right, so seeing and hearing none. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate all your work, help, and support. Thanks, Angela, too, for coming up. And we have a 6:30 public hearing on ordinance updates for Chapter 28, the fees. So we will now open that public hearing officially, and it is 6:55, so we've met our statutory requirement not to start it early.
So this, as discussed at our last meeting, is the fee ordinance changes as reflected in the budget, and some administrative changes that we have been tracking to change once the ordinance was reopened. So you have before you both a track changes version and a clean version. We actually do have one administrative change we would like to make in the version as presented to you. It doesn't change the intent or the value, but I think simplifies some language. So I'm going to have Eric come up and describe that. But otherwise, the changes you see, the significant changes you see here, one are moving the water and wastewater rate setting process and the Thrive rate setting process to a council resolution process annually with a budget, as opposed to having them prescribed in ordinance. And then those are the kind of most substantive changes.
We discussed
Eric,
those.
do you want to just point out where you're proposing an additional change?
Yes, so on page 8 of the track changes version, there are the zoning and land development fees. The last item there is a new permit fee that I had proposed for change of use in existing structures from one permitted use to another permitted use, where no other modifications, including demolition, conversion, or additions to the property, which would require a building permit, are proposed. The intent of having this included was to really recognize primarily our non-residential construction that already exists, like for example the Winooski block, where there's individual suites where a use might come and go, so that we're not charging them the full new construction rate of a commercial building. After rereading this, I felt like it was a bit confusing, and with all the additional language to try to clarify it. So what I'm proposing is that we shorten that option to just a change of use in an existing structure for one permitted use to another permitted use, period, and end it there, to remove that last part of language. If there were any, because I think the way it's written, nobody would ever really be able to qualify for it, because typically there's going to be some state permit that's needed because they're all public buildings. So if there were any if there was any alterations to the building, that would become new construction, so we would catch it under the other permits that we already have in place. So I would recommend that we shorten that language to end after use.
So what you're saying is the other processes or criteria would catch circumstances where there would be demolition, conversion.
Correct. Yeah, so if an existing building were to have an addition put onto it, for example, that would become new construction then, and we would look at it under the other zoning permits that we already have on the books.
And is there any, so this is the fee section, is there anything in the zoning ordinance, so you know, that would provide greater clarity and definition, so you don't have to define it in the fee ordinance?
I would say generally yes. I mean, in our use table, we identify specifically what are permitted uses and what are not. So that would provide some level of clarity to the community.
Okay.
Seems ineffectively duplicative. I mean, that's what he basically just said, right? It's saying something that's covered in other places and doing so in a way that's not effective.
Correct.
So it seems wise to clean it up. Any questions or concerns on this one? Or any of the other items? I think Thrive was the bigger question last time. Any other questions and follow up on that for anybody?
I do think, I mean, a big part of the question was the amount. I believe that the process here makes sense.
Yeah. A little bit more responsive. We at one point had tried to take all these numbers out and put them as done by resolution at one point, and there were some problems with doing it that way. It turns out that's not legal, but
yeah. I mean, I do see value of there being as singular of a document for transparency that individuals in the community can go to.
yeah.
But there are points where it does make sense from a point of process to not have to reopen up this document every single time with things that will change
Mhm.
more frequently.
I think too, you know, as I look through a lot of these fees for general things, we're still really low in comparison to other places for things like restaurant licensing fees and things like that. So even marriage licenses and vital record stuff. So thanks for the work to try to balance the need to ensure revenue-wise we're being appropriate, but also doing as much as we can. Yep.
Sorry, there were two other significant changes that I should have mentioned at the beginning. I just want to go on record as mentioning, which are the addition of the fingerprint service, which we have not previously offered, in the associated fee. And we've taken every place where there is a fee set by state statute, we have just referenced state statute
Yes.
as opposed to listing it in our own ordinance and then updating it every time there's a state statute change. So
We covered
Two
those
important-
last time. I thought
We
they
did.
were like brand new things.
No,
like, oh,
just
what did I
two
miss
significant
reading
things
this?
to this.
Okay.
Well, the new things are the Thrive pieces, and so moving from setting the rates in this ordinance to saying the council will establish by resolution during the budget process, so, this, and I need to go back and look, are we gonna be, approving a resolution next week
Yep.
related to Thrive?
And
Fees.
water and wastewater rates.
Great.
Other questions, comments, concerns from council? We covered most of these items in depth last week too. Any questions, concerns, comments from the public? Okay, so seeing and hearing none, in the course of our public hearing, Chapter 28 fees are being proposed tonight, and there's an option for council to accept the changes as presented. I entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Nicole, second by Hal. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries. Thank you for all your work on that. And I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this to you, but with that, there's an executive session next on the council agenda. It's on a matter that, as a course of the duties in my professional life, that I'm recused on because I'm an employee at Vermont Housing Finance Agency, which facilitated the bonds associated with the transaction referenced in the lawsuit in the executive session warning. So I will take this opportunity to excuse myself, and council can consider whether or not to move into executive session. And I turn the gavel over.
So, we have before us an item on the agenda to enter into executive session to discuss pending litigation to which the city is a party, referring to UMB Bank versus City of Winooski, and also the negotiation of real estate purchase or lease options. So I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to the statutory references on the agenda.
And,
Second.
sorry,
And we'd like to bring Attorney Bob DePalma,
and Angela.
Angela, and Jesse with us.
Second.
Motion by Eric, second by Hal. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. We're in executive session. We will come back only to adjourn.